Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair. Richard Lyon on behalf of the California Building Industry Association. And it's been said here today that the SB 50 program is a public-private partnership, and Mr. Baca reinforced that. I represent the private side of that equation. By way of brief background, I represented the industry in the SB 50 negotiations back in 1998. And I've worked on virtually every bond campaign since, statewide bond campaign since the late 80s, and assisted our local BIAs in local bond campaigns as well. I would say this, that we believe the existing program is a good one. We believe that it has produced results, that it has maintained that critical partnership, and has brought more dollars to the table than in any comparable time since the state's been involved in school facility financing. Just a couple observations on what we've heard today from the legislative analyst and from the administration. And I haven't read the LAO's report, so I'm going based upon what I heard today. But it appears that the proposal is to scrap the existing and what we think is a successful program and reconstruct it in a way that drastically curtails the state's involvement to one of basically deferred maintenance, and then takes the state's obligation that it currently has to act as a partner in financing school facilities and settle that down to the local level, thinking that there's enough bond capacity and enough developer fee capacity to be able to make up that delta. We think that's a wrong way to go. The beauty of the program that we put together in 1998, and I think it needs to be said, is that it connected public and private financing in a way that had never been done before. And as a result, over the last 16 plus years, the estimates are that this partnership has produced well over $100 billion in financing. And from the developer-builder perspective, we estimate that through fees, through Mello-Roos community facility districts, and through master mitigation agreements that we have in the larger scale developments with school districts, we have contributed about $15 billion since 1998. And that's a significant contribution. We have housed more kids over the last 16 plus years in modernization. I think the LAO has indicated that there are about 3.5 million kids who have benefited in new construction, about 1.5 million that have benefited. That's almost the entirety of the current K-12 population. So it has been, from our perspective, a very successful program. Now, certainly, you know, there are ways to deal with issues that come up, and we're certainly willing to sit down and talk about that. But to throw the program out and to attempt to reconstruct it in a way that moves from a need-based program to one that funds on a kind of formulaic per pupil approach, we think is the wrong way to go. This program we have today is based upon need, is based upon eligibility. If you've got kids coming into the program that you don't have existing capacity for, that delta gets you eligibility, and you can go to the state and get a grant that is matched locally. And generally, at the local level in new construction, it is builder fees and builder contributions that match the state contribution. The way we put the program together is in the new construction areas, it's a state obligation and a local school district obligation, with builders backstopping the locals. So if locals are not able to raise the 50 cents to match the state's 50 cents, builders are there, and typically that's the way the program has operated. The program is a needs-based, as I said, and we think it needs to continue that way. And it also has an element of important housing policy that is woven into it that is important in terms of the financing and delivery of school facilities. Builders have been part of this program since the late 60s and the 70s. It was the first state program that actually devised a developer fee. That was the SB 201 fee for temporary facilities. Later in the 80s, we expanded that to permanent facilities. I was at the table during those discussions, and we were a key partner in putting that program together. That 1986 law began to fall apart when districts said, look, one size fee doesn't fit all. Districts come to the table in a variety of different conditions with a variety of different local situations, and one fee isn't going to cover everything. So we saw quite a bit of litigation in the late 80s and early 90s, and then in 1998, we believe we solved the funding riddle by bringing state, local, and builder fees to the table. But importantly, we said there has to be a logical connection to what we pay to offset our impact on new school facilities. And so we established a school facility needs analysis that's done at the local level. And this looks at the particular needs of the district. It looks at their growth needs, it looks at land values, it looks at existing revenues they have, and it calculates it all on a yearly basis, and it comes up with a mitigation fee, if you will, that once that fee is paid, that's it. That's full and complete mitigation, and the builder or developer can't be held up further in the land use and entitlement process through CEQA or something else to try and extract more. That's all woven into the SB 50 program. So if we just throw the program out and talk about kind of reconstructing it, we're throwing a lot more out than just the state's involvement. We're throwing out potentially a very important housing policy that has been critical to advancing a good relationship between builders and school districts over the last 16 plus years. Let me just say this, that on the economic side, California has 7 of the 10 highest, I should say, least affordable housing metropolitan areas in the nation, 7 of the 10. Our home ownership rate is very weak vis-a-vis the rest of the nation. The median value of a home in California last month was about $384,000. That's just the median price. That's 111% higher than the national average. And of the 30 California counties that have been identified by Mr. Savage as actually having growth potential over the next decade, 7 of those, Riverside, San Diego, Kern, San Bernardino, Sacramento, and Fresno, and San Joaquin, these are the ones that are all expected to see growth. And these are the areas where middle-income families, young families, are looking to establish a foothold in California life. And so the potential to increase contributions from these middle-income earners to $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 per unit just for schools alone, and that doesn't account for all the other impacts that a development pays for roads and everything else, will push, I think, housing affordability through the roof, and it makes it that much more difficult for these individuals to be able to qualify for a new home. A lot's been said about the local capacity. We agree with the administration and we agree with the LAO that we should look at the tax rate structures on individual bonds locally and the overall capacity of districts. We think that's a good conversation to have. But understand this, and we worked on the Prop 39 campaign. Back when we put SB 50 together, Prop 39 was part of the package, but we realized we had to do that at a separate time. Those bonds are primarily for modernization and repair and replacement. They're not for new construction. There's very, very, very few of the Prop 39 bonds that are there to advantage new construction. Capital City Finance, that is an entity that looks at all these financing and local issues, reported that this past November, there were 113 local K-14 school bond measures that went before local voters, and 91 of them passed. Of the 113, 20 of them came from the top 6 growth counties in the state. And as we looked at those 20 that were in the growth areas, 2 actually allowed for construction of new school facilities. So we understand that there's a desire to, for everybody to pull their own weight on this, and we think that by and large that's been happening, but to look solely to local capacity and to think that local bonds are going to be able to fulfill the need is incorrect, particularly as it applies to new school construction. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and Mr. Block as well, and happy to take any questions. I would just say that we believe this is a good program with modifications and little tweaks here that should continue. Thank you very much.
I'd like to give the LAO's office a chance to respond. There's some significant concerns raised by Mr. Lyon about your proposal, and Mr. Vaca raised a concern particularly about Prop 98 funds being used to support your proposal. And I would guess that Mr. Vaca's concerns are probably shared by many other education entities. So would you take a few moments to address both Mr. Lyon's concerns, and again, I asked earlier about Prop 98, and you said, well, we'll deal with that later, but I think that's pretty significant to deal with sooner.
I think to address some of Mr. Lyon's concerns first, I think it's important to clarify that under our proposal, the state still would have a significant role in financing and building school facilities. And I think nothing that we propose would suggest that we would bring an end to the partnership between school districts, the state, as well as developers. Again, we're proposing annual funding to all school districts, not just the hardship cases, as we understand the governor's proposal to be. And these funds could be used again for new construction, modernization, and maintenance, the full gamut of school facility needs. And just to look at some of our kind of hypotheticals that you can see more details on in our report, using various estimates of need, for example, a 25-year building replacement, we estimated the state that school districts could need approximately $8 billion annually from all sources. Again, the state would provide a share of that. On a 50-year replacement, $4 billion a year. So these are in the ballpark of what we've been providing as a state. Just as a reminder to provide some context, we provided approximately $2 billion a year under the school facility program. So what we're talking about, what we're proposing, is certainly not outside the realm of what of the kind of the significant role the state has been providing to date. What it is doing is kind of changing the distribution system for the school facility program. And again, we would take a little bit of an issue with the assertion that the current system is doing a really good job of allocating funds based on need. We think there are serious flaws with the current process. You've heard about the concerns about the excessive complexity, which creates a significant burden for districts that lack resources, that lack dedicated facilities personnel, that lack the resources to hire these expensive consultants to navigate the school facility program. It also, perhaps a bit counterintuitively, has created some challenges for large urban districts that may have these resources, but that have unique challenges, unique site challenges in developing schools in urban areas that actually, as you're aware, led to a lawsuit in 2000 challenging that they were disadvantaged by the current system of allocating funds, which we have continued subsequent to that lawsuit. And lastly, we think the current system, as has been mentioned so often today, allows these disparities based on property wealth. And we think that it would be a wise practice for the state to follow the lead of the at least 20 other states in the country that factor in property wealth as a factor in allocating state funds.
And go ahead, Paul.
Paul Goloszewski with the LAO again. I guess to address the concern with funding facilities within Proposition 98, I think the one thing that you want to keep in mind, as you're well aware this year, because of the way that we've interpreted some of the rules as to how the guarantee is calculated, virtually all of the revenue increase that the state is seeing is going towards schools, and that's going to happen in the future as well. It's quite complex, and I'm not the right person from our office to walk you through why that's occurring, but it's important to keep that in mind. And when Proposition 98 was established, it really, I don't think, was ever intended to do that. It was supposed to be more like 40 or 50% of new revenues. So I think that's an important point to keep in mind when you're thinking about whether or not to fund it within the guarantee or outside of the guarantee. If you went with the traditional bond approach, I think it's important to realize that there's a significant general fund cost that is associated with that. I think an easy rule of thumb is if you issue $1 billion in bonds, that you're going to have $365 million in debt service coming from the general fund that is essentially coming at the expense of other program areas, health programs, social service programs, a variety of other areas. So I think we would encourage you to take a sort of a broader view of your entire budget when making this decision about whether or not to fund within or outside the guarantee if you go with our proposal, and not sort of view it as just narrowly within the context of schools.